Hi everyone. It's me. It's 10 a.m. and I'm here to share with you some ideas for very realistic and accessible New Year's resolutions. But yes, I want them to be really realistic and really accessible. And so I hope that you find the same. I'm also hoping that you find something that resonates with you so that you can integrate it and give it a try. Just checking that things are live, and it looks like we are, so I'm going to get started. So let's start with 1 minute of mindfulness. And yes, this is an example of one of the things that I'll be suggesting today for a New Year's resolution. Just 1 minute of mindfulness a day. Sounds maybe to some people like very little, and then for some of us who are very busy and who have to put our focus on external things all the time, that might sound like something both beneficial and accessible that we're not yet doing. So let's do it together right now. 1 minute of mindfulness. So mindfulness might be your eyes open or closed. You might use breath awareness as your focal point, or bodily sensations. Or the observation of mental phenomena. What's going on in your mind? What are you mindful of right now? What are you noticing? I hear birds outside my tiny house, and the sound of my refrigerator, which is right across from my bed because I live in a tiny house. What do you notice? I notice tension in my shoulders and in my neck. I notice my jaw clenching a little. What do you notice? I notice my breath getting deeper as I settle in. What do you notice? So that was probably a little more than 1 minute. And maybe that's something that is accessible for you and realistic for you to integrate, is just to say, every day I'm going to take 1 minute of mindfulness. You can either choose a focus, breath, bodily sensation, the contents of your mind, or awareness of thought, whatever you might call it, awareness of emotion, environmental awareness. So you might choose a focus, or you might just say, I'm going to take 1 minute of mindfulness a day and notice what I notice, as Juan Villegas likes to say. Notice what you notice. So that is one idea for a New Year's resolution. Let's carry on. Now, I wanted to share a little story just regarding the mindset that gives rise to this idea of just one New Year's resolution. Many, many years ago, when I first encountered Ayurveda, I found a local practitioner, but who happened to be from India. He was a 4th generation South Indian Ayurvedic doctor. And I went to see him, and I benefited greatly. He gave me suggestions that were accessible to me based on my interest in Ayurveda, as well as my self-discipline around my lifestyle practices. So it worked for me really well. And then my boyfriend at the time went, and it worked for him really well. He had systemic lupus erythematosus. He'd recently been diagnosed, and I saw it work for him. And then I started telling everybody, go to this Ayurvedic doctor. It's amazing. It will work for you. And then I had one friend come. She was a coworker, actually. And she came and she said, I went to see that doctor that you recommended, that Ayurvedic doctor, that Vedya. And she was 23, I think, at the time, maybe even 21. And she said, I said, well, how was it? And she said, well, I didn't like it really. And I said, oh, why? And she said, well, I told him what all my problems were, health problems. And he said that I should stop drinking. And she said, that's what I do. I hang out with my friends and we drink. We drink alcohol. And she wasn't, she came to work on time. She didn't drink through the day or anything. So she was a social drinker at 21 or 23. I can't remember how old she was. And she said, so that's just not realistic for me. I'm not going to quit drinking. And that's when I realized that we can have a lot of information about how to make our lives better. But some of it's just not going to be realistic for us. It's not going to be accessible, or we don't like it. I once had a client for an Ayurvedic consultation. She was quite young, but already a retired professional swimmer. And I gave her the suggestion of doing neti for one of her problems, one of her challenges, health challenges, which is, if you don't know what neti is, it's putting salt water through the nasal passages with a little pot. And she just said straight up, I'm not going to do that. I spent years being a professional swimmer. I had a nose plug. I hate the feeling of water up my nose. I will not do it. And once again, it was shown to me that you can have all kinds of information, but our skill, whether as practitioners that are supporting other people, whether as yoga teachers or Ayurveda practitioners or any other, as an RMT now, massage therapist, which I also do, my goal is always to observe the person, talk to the person, find out what's realistic for the person, and then make suggestions that are realistic for them, accessible for them, for which they have the resources, things that they're interested in, maybe even things that they already do that they can just do a little bit differently, and then to just integrate one or two things at a time. So that's where the idea for today's discussion came from. So let's carry on. So a minute of mindfulness, and it could focus on any of those things that I mentioned. If you missed the beginning, you can always watch the replay of this and get all the details about a minute of mindfulness. So the next thing that I like to do, I'm going to start in the early morning and then move through the day, the daily routine ideas, and then have a couple for seasonal. So morning gratitude ritual. I talked about this in a recent student development session, and I still forget it myself sometimes. I've gotten in the habit where I'll remember it every day, and then I'll forget it for a little while because my schedule changes, like with the holidays. And then today I remembered to do it again. You could do any kind of morning gratitude ritual. One that I do is I rub my hands together. Feel free to do it with me. Make them nice and warm. You probably know this from yoga practices. Mine are having a hard time getting warm. And then put them over your eyes. You could also put them anywhere else that you feel you need that heat. And then I look up with eyes closed, looking up, looking down, looking left, looking right. Clockwise, eyes go all the way around. It's gentle, there's no forcing. Counterclockwise, eyes go all the way around. And then I thank the universe, what powers may be, for another day of life. So that's my gratitude ritual for the morning, but you could make up your own. One that I've heard more than once that is seems to be from the Indian culture, from India, is just waking up and looking at the hands and then thanking God or the universe or whatever, whoever, nature, for another day of life. So find something that's meaningful to you. All right. What next? So I forgot to bring with me into the frame here, or close enough that I could grab it, my tongue scraper. But I've been scraping my tongue for years, and it's not just about cleanliness or hygiene. It's actually, it actually stimulates the digestive system. So a few years ago I found one that was made locally, and it's made out of copper, and I really like it. Before that I had usually stainless steel ones that I would buy at at a shop that has goods from India. You can find them in drugstores. I think you can find plastic ones that have a little piece of metal or stainless steel inserted. But I really love the copper one that I found, and I've seen them online. So I think that even though mine was locally made, they're sort of a popular thing. It has a nice weight. It was very affordable. It was only $10, Canadian dollars. And what scraping the tongue does is a number of things. So scraping the tongue is done first thing in the morning before you consume anything. You go to the bathroom where you have a mirror. You turn on the light. I don't like turning on lights in the morning. I prefer to use candlelight, but for this practice I turn on the light, and then stick out your tongue and look at your tongue. So the first thing about tongue scraping that is beneficial is that by looking at your tongue, you get an idea of the state of health, the relative state of health in your body, at least insofar as the presence of ama is concerned. Ama is a word that means toxins. So when we have a coating on our tongue repeatedly day after day, that's an indication that our digestive fire isn't strong enough to digest everything that we're consuming every day. Therefore, this residue is still on the tongue because it hasn't been digested, even overnight while we were resting. So it's an indication that what we're putting in is either of a poor quality, so it isn't being properly digested, or it's too much quantity, it's too great a quantity, and we're not properly digesting it. Therefore, the tongue still has this residue on it in the morning. That residue can have a whitish color, a yellowish color, sort of a blackish undertones, and that kind of tells you whether the effect is a kapha, whitish, pitta, yellowish, blackish, vata kind of residue or issue. But basically it's just saying your digestion isn't strong enough to handle what you're putting in your body these days. And it might even be that your digestion is quite strong, but maybe you're overly physically active, you're doing too much, and so that's weakening your digestion. So it's not just necessarily the quantity or quality of food. It can also be that we're depleting our energy through other practices, and then our body doesn't have enough of that energy left over for the digestion of what we're putting in our bodies. So again, we could come at it in different ways. We could either reduce our activity, spend more time in stillness with rest. This might be something more appropriate for vata. And then, or we can, do other things, but I'm going off on a tangent now. The bottom line is, by looking at your tongue in the morning, you see whether your digestive fire is sufficient to digest everything, including the residue on your tongue. I'm debating whether I should show you my tongue right now. I looked at it this morning. It's pretty clean. Let's see. It's hard to tell in this light, but I did already have coffee with oat milk. But now I'm drinking ginger tea, which we'll talk about soon. So anyway, scraping your tongue helps you see the state of ama in your body. And again, don't worry about 1 day's coated tongue or 2 days. It might just be a temporary thing. It's when you start to see the tongue coated every day before you scrape it. And you scrape you stick it out, and use your tongue scraper with 2 hands and scrape it, 3 to 7 times, and that's it. Don't go crazy. And then the coating comes off, and then it stimulates digestion because you're stimulating your tongue. So you might even feel your tummy start to move, your stomach start to go like, gar, 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 I'm ready to eat something. And so all of these things come just because you've integrated that one habit of tongue scraping. You take a moment to notice the health of your digestive fire. You stimulate your digestive fire by scraping the tongue, and then you're ready to carry on with your day. So what might you do next? If you're not into tongue scraping, and I know people who aren't, what about a cup of hot water to start your day? Some people already do this. It's very big in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda to start the day with a cup of warm to hot water, depending what your constitution tolerates and depending on the season. It is said that this cup of hot water just flushes the kidneys. It just flushes out the system and the kidneys, and it makes sense. Well, we've gotten up in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning and we see how concentrated our urine is, right? It might be quite a while since we had any fluids. So you get the fluid going by taking this cup of warm or hot water, and that can feel great as well. I know I had a client who wanted to start drinking less coffee. So one of the suggestions I made was start your day with a cup of hot water. And she successfully cut down her coffee consumption because she said that she got, which is what I suspected, she said that she did feel satisfied with this hot beverage warming her up, from the inside out, and that feeling of the warmth going down into her body first thing in the morning. But she was getting so much of the benefit that she had previously only been getting from coffee, from the water now as well, that she felt the need to drink less coffee. So she managed to cut down by a cup by drinking a cup of hot water first. So sometimes these things are beneficial in more ways than we can even imagine or know until we start doing them. So starting your day with a cup of hot water to flush the kidneys, to warm your cockles, just to feel good. So another one. Now I wrote down oil pulling, and it is from Ayurveda, and I have done it intermittently. But when I suggest oil pulling now, I'm not going to suggest it with a bunch of the claims that you might find online, because I did some research and I looked at the studies, and there aren't a lot of studies to strongly support certain claims, but there are many, many crazy claims made for what oil pulling does. I shouldn't say crazy. Ones that are hard to imagine are accurate even after 22 years of studying Ayurveda. I would still say, I don't know. But what I do think oil pulling is beneficial for, and not 10 or 20 minutes necessarily, is I think that it is very beneficial if you have gingivitis, or if you have receding gums or bleeding gums. And if you have bleeding gums, I would do it with coconut oil, which is cooling. And you can start with 1 tablespoon, because some places suggest 2, but for my mouth, that feels like a mouthful of oil. And not only can I barely move it around, but it just kind of grosses me out. So it's a little too much oil. So I would start with 1 tablespoon of coconut oil, and then just pull it through the teeth and move it back and forth. And this has to be on a totally empty stomach. So you would do this before your hot water, if you're going to do the hot water, but after scraping your tongue, because maybe you're going to integrate more than one thing. I don't know. Maybe you already do some of these things. So if you do oil pulling, I'm suggesting it based on the idea that it can be helpful for moisturizing the tissues of the mouth when there's bleeding gums, receding gums, or gingivitis, bad breath. So an option, 1 to 2 minutes of oil pulling of 1 to 2 tablespoons of high quality organic oil, probably coconut or sunflower. Sunflower is a nice middle ground oil that is not too heating, not too cooling. Coconut's cooling, sesame is warming. So if you tend toward being cold and you have receding gums, sesame oil is warming and will be a little more stimulating. So that might be the one you use for receding gums, coconut oil for bleeding gums, sunflower oil just for general purposes, just for moisturizing the mouth. I have a friend that suffers from oral lichen planus, which is not a very well-known autoimmune condition, and she's going to try this as well. So there may be other conditions for which it is appropriate, but at least for bleeding gums, gingivitis, or receding gums, it can be great. Okay. The next suggestion I had is 5 minutes of meditation. But if that seems overwhelming, integrating 5 minutes of meditation a day, what about 1 minute of meditation? And then you can just work up from there. And then I also had 5 minutes of yoga. Does that seem overwhelming? How about 1 minute? The other day, while I was toasting a bagel, I don't know if you saw my post on my personal Instagram, but I was shocked at how much yoga I could do in the time it took my bagel to toast. I did a warrior one, and then I think I did a prayer twist lunge, and then pigeon all on one side, and then warrior one, prayer twist lunge, and pigeon on the other side. And I take pretty long, slow breaths, only about 4 to 5 breaths a minute when I'm doing yoga. And I took probably 6 to 8 breaths. So I have to time how long it takes to toast a bagel, because I'm just shocked that I was able to do that much yoga. But maybe I have a distorted sense of how long I was in each posture. We'll see. The point is, make it accessible. So if there's something you're already doing every morning and you're tending to stand around looking at your phone or staring blankly out the window, not mindfully, but blankly, you're lost in thought, maybe designate that time for doing 1 minute of meditation, or 1 minute of yoga, or 1 minute of mindfulness, or 1 minute of breath awareness. So just make it accessible. You can always add more minutes. If 5 minutes seems accessible, then that's great too. So think about that, and think about where there's already a time in your morning. For example, while I'm warming up oat milk for my morning beverage, I usually do the dishes. But sometimes if the dishes don't have to be done right then I'll go do yoga instead, because I know it's going to take several minutes. And I think, well, I really need to do yoga. I know I'm going to do the dishes no matter what, but I might make an excuse to not do any yoga if I don't do it now. So find a place in your day where you already have 1 or 2 minutes of sort of waiting, and see if you can insert some meditation, yoga, breath awareness. Okay, last but not least, a couple of seasonal routine ideas. So I'm drinking ginger tea. All it is peeled, chopped ginger that I boiled in water for, I don't know, as soon as it starts boiling, I turn it down to a low rolling boil, and then I usually boil it for at least a simmer for at least 10 minutes. I'm going to take a sip now because all this talking is making my throat a bit dry. Oh yeah, I was very thirsty. So, ginger, you might have read the recent blog article that I wrote on ginger. Ginger is just a wonderful, mildly pungent, which is like sort of mildly spicy spice that is great for stoking Agni. So especially if you notice that coating on your tongue in the morning, if you feel like you can integrate a second thing in addition to tongue scraping, or maybe you already do tongue scraping and you've been noticing that, drinking ginger tea daily is a wonderful way to keep the body warm, to stoke the Agni in this colder time. I know not everybody is in a cold place, and I want to acknowledge those of you who may be somewhere warm. And if that's the case, you can still drink ginger tea, but you might make it more mild, either by adding just plain water afterwards, and you might drink it cool instead of hot. So ginger tea is wonderful. You can make it the strength that is palatable to you. Obviously, stronger is going to heat you up more, and that's not always great. If you're in a hot environment, or you're a pitta type person, or you've been suffering from pitta type aggravations, like irritability, feeling too hot, that kind of thing, then you're not going to want to drink a really strong ginger tea, and or you may want to drink it warm or cool instead of hot. So think about integrating ginger tea. I usually use, like, if the average ginger root is a little less than an inch in diameter, I probably use 1 inch by 1 inch for 2 liters of water, but then you can make it go further if you boil it longer, if you simmer it longer. So that's another way to use less ginger but make it stronger, is just simmer it longer. So that is ginger tea. So finally, my last suggestion is also a seasonal suggestion. If you are in a cool or cold environment right now, consider eating warm, moist, lightly spiced meals most of the time. So that might be a warm breakfast cereal instead of something that's cold and dry. That might be making something for dinner where you can saute in a little bit of oil with some little bit of spice that you like: cumin, coriander, ginger, turmeric, black or sometimes called brown mustard seed. All of these are lovely and warming, and they can warm up your food and help you digest in this colder season when your digestion might not be as strong because of the cold environment outside, or because you're not as active as usual, and so maybe your digestion again has fallen below, or maybe you just ate a lot of heavy food over the holidays. So help your body help itself by making your food more digestible, by making sure that it has adequate spice, not a bunch, but just nice warming spice: black pepper, ginger, coriander, cumin, turmeric, so on, whatever you like. And then also by adding enough oil, not heaps and heaps. And if you are a kapha predominant type, or if you're suffering from kapha aggravation, if you have a lot of extra weight on, then you'll have a little more spice, a little less oil. Okay? So that just about wraps it up. I usually don't manage to finish this on time because, boy, most of you know that I like to talk once I get going. Claudia, I see your question here. Can the ama also be due to medications? Claudia asks in the comments. So yes, ama can be caused by putting something in your body that is already toxic by nature. By its own nature. So that could be preservatives in foods that we know aren't good for us, but we're eating food that's convenient because that's what we need to do for a little while. And so that can bring with it toxins. And toxins are essentially anything that your body doesn't deal with efficiently. So it's not a big bad word, and I'm not going to throw it at all kinds of things, but you know, you could eat really high quality food, but if you eat too much of it and you don't digest it properly, then Ayurveda suggests that that food remains improperly digested in your body because it hasn't been sufficiently digested in order for your body to know what to do with it. So if it's properly digested, it either becomes something that's assimilated, like a nutrient, and it becomes nourishing for your body, or it's eliminated, like indigestible fiber, insoluble fiber. So what happens when we eat too much, or we eat poor quality food, or something in our life is making our digestion poorer, not as strong, not adequate, is that we start to accumulate ama in the digestive tract. And that's the first, that is the first of the 6 steps in becoming ill in Ayurveda. And so we want to do everything we can to prevent the accumulation of ama in the digestive tract. So watching it when you looking at the tongue, that can help. Ginger tea, that can help. If you are interested in an Ayurvedic consultation, of course I do them. Feel free to send me a message through Messenger, add me as a friend. Also, if you do have some questions about what I've talked about in this video, please just put them underneath and tag me if you can remember to. That would be great. And then I can answer them when I have a minute. So I hope that answered your question, Claudia. The answer is yes. Medications can potentially cause ama for sure, because medications have a lot of side effects, and those are, you know, those side effects too can then cause further ama. So thank you all for taking the time to join me today, and I hope that you will take one of these suggestions and be able to integrate it with ease into your life for the benefit of your health and well-being. I'm going to take a mindful minute as soon as I press stop. Wishing you a good day, a good year. Namaste.